What's up? This your boy Derek Wrench here at Strike7Sports.com. This is an episode of Strike 7 Sports Podcast. I'm joined with my co-host Brian Bottomdale, the Seabear. This is another episode of Strike 7 Sports Podcast. Tonight we continue our NFL team preview talk. And last week we did the Green Bay Packers. This week we have the New Orleans Saints, team that I follow and love. And we got a special guest with us tonight from Saints News Network, contributor of Sports Illustrated, and host of the Bayou Blitz Podcast. I'd like to welcome Bob Rose to the show. What's going on, man?
Derek, I appreciate you guys having me on. Derek, Brian, Seaberry, I'm honored to join you. Thank you so much for having me on. Hope you guys are having a great night.
Oh, yeah, man. Most definitely, man. So, all right, we're going to run into it. Preseason kicked off. And you know how it is with Saints Twitter and the fan base. We, blow things out of proportion. And a lot of things that, it wasn't, I wouldn't say that as bad as it was last year with the injuries. But I would say a rash of, injuries that flared up is not very, they're not really making nothing big out of it yet. But I think around the scrimmage, there was a injury with Trevor Penning, the rookie, limped off. Corner reports he came back. James Hurst went out, hearing that he didn't show back up. There was a guy that they brought in. I forgot his name already, but I think they waived him. And there has been the linebacker issue with second-year linebacker Pete Warner went out. Mm-hmm. Been struggling with a groin injury. Just want to ask you, what is the biggest, based on what you see, what is the biggest position concern of the team, of the Saints right now?
Well, listen, Derek, if you read Saints Twitter, and I know you guys do, everybody is most concerned about the Jameis Winston foot injury, which he suffered in practice about a little over a week ago. But listen, Jameis is not going to play on Friday. I highly doubt he plays next week against the Chargers. Dennis Allen and the coaching staff is just taking extra precautions with him. He doesn't need to work up any extra timing with those new wideouts because they've done that in practice. So realistically, I think the most concerning injury is to Pete Werner. Now, we've heard that it's a run-of-the-mill groin injury. But if you're an athlete and you've ever had a groin injury, there's no such thing as a run-of-the-mill groin injury. This guy needs as much rest as possible. Between him and Demario Davis, I'm not concerned about, as long as they're healthy, I'm not concerned about those two at starting linebacker. So, again, I wouldn't expect Werner to get any definitely not any snaps against Green Bay. And probably very little action through the rest of training camp. He's going to need to rest that thing for the September 11th opener against Atlanta. Which I don't think is I not only don't disagree with that move, I want to see these other linebackers really prove themselves anyway. They just signed John Bostic, which I think is a great pickup. Eric Wilson and Chase Hansen both played good football against the Texans last week. And have had a good week of practice so far against Green Bay. So I say let those other guys play. Let them solidify that depth in the and the New Orleans linebacking core. Because if they can't, the Saints are going to have to go linebacker hunting. Even if Warner does turn out to just need a little bit of rest, depth at that position still concerns me if these guys don't show out in the preseason.
So you have any? You don't think the whole line is an issue right now with Penning going down? Well, it's up in the air with his condition.
Yeah, I absolutely think offensive line is a big issue, particularly the second string, who I thought has performed very poorly during camp so far. Definitely struggled against Houston and against the Green Bay defense in their two scrimmages this week. Penning, the learning curve for him is going to be a little bit wider because he did come from a smaller school. He's a mauler in the run game, but he just needs to refine that technique a little bit in the pass game. So that guy needs reps. There's no doubt in my mind. Now, having said that, we don't know the extent of his injury suffered against Green Bay, like you mentioned, Derek. So it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't see any action on Friday night against the Packers either. James Hurst went down with a foot injury. So that offensive line, I'm still very confident in what we expect to be the starting five. But outside of Calvin Throckmorton, who I thought played underrated football football last year. Those backups have not shown me anything yet. I think Trevor Penning is going to be a stud. It's just going to take a little bit of time, and someone among that backup crew, other than Throckmorton and Penning, someone else needs to step up to make you feel a little bit more comfortable, because you guys know how battered that Saints offensive line was last year, and that, among all else, was the chief reason for that the struggles on that side of the football.
Yeah, Brian Lil, you got anything to ask?
I was just gonna ask: is there any chance Jameis misses the opener, or you think he'll play?
I think he'll play. Everything that Dennis Allen has said, and listen, we're all used to the Sean Payton coach speak for the last 16 years, where where he would be very close to the vest with with injury updates. But I feel like Dennis Allen is being a little bit more forthright with the media. And he's saying that there's nothing to worry about with Jameis. Jameis did show out in pads for the beginning of the practice against Green Bay, but when they went into the inter squad scrimmages, that's when he called it a day. So that's an indication to me, that I have a feeling that if this was a game situation, a regular season game, against the Green Bay Packers in particular, that Jameis would somehow be able to get patched up. So, while there's always a possibility that he could miss the opener until he is back onto the field, I would find it highly surprising at this point. I just think they're taking as many precautions as they can, with their young quarterback.
Speaking of Dennis Allen, kind of as a Raiders fan, I've had my preservations about making him the Saints making him the head coach. Kind of feel like it was a higher. How from your experience, like from you knowing with the Saints organization, what has been like the reaction to his first couple of his first training camp with the Saints as the head man?
I'll tell you, I've always liked Dennis Allen as a defensive coach, but I see what you're saying about his history with the Raiders. But remember, I mean, he was a young coach at the time. Bill Belichick, Mike Shanahan, Pete Carroll, they all failed. Josh McDaniels, they all failed in their first attempts as head coach. Hopefully, Dennis Allen, as a Saints fan, I'm really hoping that Dennis Allen has learned from those mistakes. But I will tell you this about Allen's training camp practices so far. They are extremely organized. And even though he's a defensive guy, he's wandering the field at all times. So he is very involved in what the offense is doing. Obviously, he's not interfering with what Pete Carmichael or any of those other offensive coordinators are doing as far as planning and running their own practices. But DA is very involved in what's going on in all aspects of training camp. And as a first-year head coach for this team, you can't help but like that philosophy. We know that Sean Payton was an offensive guy, and pretty much just left the defense to Dennis Allen and the other coordinators that he had over the years. So, that's the biggest difference I see with Dennis Allen so far, is he seems to be a little bit more involved in every aspect of practice. The practices are extremely organized. He doesn't have any hesitation in giving veterans some extra time off. And y'all know what a long grind this season is. So I like that philosophy too. You want your veterans to be rested. We'll see if that philosophy pays off, because if the Saints struggle early on coming out of the gate, there's going to be all kinds of criticism, upon Dennis Allen, saying that he did not have these veterans ready. But I like the philosophy and the approach that he's had so far.
All right, moving right along. Next topic. So, Michael Thomas, he's coming back from the injury, and the narrative that's been placed on him, by, I would guess, social media, for the most part, they call him slant boy, slant guy. All he does is catch, 6-yard passes, 16-yard passes, and dominate. So I'm gonna ask you, now that we know that Drew Brees' arm was pretty much shot in that last year, do you think that we're gonna see a different element to his game, Michael Thomas's game, now that the Saints have a quarterback with a better arm?
Yeah, I think we will. Listen, Michael Thomas is not going to be mistaken for a Tyreek Hill or a Randy Moss. He doesn't have that kind of game-breaking deep speed, but we have seen him beat defensive backs over the top. That game against the LA Rams, where he pulled the cell phone out from under the goalpost. Remember, that was a long bomb for a touchdown. So Michael Thomas I've always thought that Thomas has had extremely underrated athleticism. Having said that, he is most effective on those intermediate routes. I know he has the nickname and the criticism of Slant Boy, but you click on the entire Michael Thomas tape, he can run every route on the route tree, and he is, in my opinion, the most precise route runner in the NFL. Certainly the most physical. I mean, he's going to make defensive backs earn their money when they go up against him. So yeah, I think we're going to see a different element of Michael Thomas. I think Chris Olave, Deontay Hardy, they're going to be your primary deep guys. But look at the way Jameis Winston worked with Mike Evans during his time in Tampa Bay. And I think Michael Thomas and Mike Evans are very comparable receivers in their physical skill sets and just the way that they play the game. That's the kind of receiver, that's the kind of numbers and production you're going to see from Michael Thomas. We are going to see more deep balls from him, but he's not going to be their primary deep threat. He is still going to be the over the middle guy, the boundary guy that works the sidelines. People forget that about him, is how well he does that. But yeah, I think we're going to see a more well-rounded Michael Thomas in 2022.
See, Barry, what you got?
I was looking at some reports on the Saints, and earlier about wide receiver there being a lot. That's going to be a really deep position with them. I was seeing that for a trade candidate, or I think it was like Beecher Report. They were saying like Marquez Callaway could be someone that the Saints look to move, maybe like because of his lack of progression or things of that nature. Is there any substance behind it, or do you think that there's a plan for Callaway to be on the roster and have a big part of the offense?
Man, that's a great question. And none of us have heard any substantial rumors to the Saints shopping either Marquez Callaway or Traquan Smith, who I also think could possibly be moved. But I have said from the start, and I even wrote an article early in the offseason around minicamp, and I listed Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith as potential trade candidates. Because like you said, Seabury, the Saints look like they have an extremely deep receiving core right now. You got Thomas coming back. You have a 5-time Pro Bowler in Jarvis Landry, first-round draft pick in Chris Olave. Those are going to be your top 3 receivers. The fourth guy somewhere on that depth chart, but the 4th spot is going to go to Deontay Hardy because of his underrated route running ability and obviously how dangerous he is as a kick returner. The Saints very, very rarely keep 6 wide receivers. If they do, and I do think it's possible this year, that 6th guy is going to be a developmental guy who plays special teams. That rules out Traquan Smith, and it rules out Marquez Callaway, which means those 2 guys are essentially fighting for one spot. I never have thought that both Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith will make this team, but I think either guy is a little bit too talented to just cut loose on the waiver wire because they'll be snatched up in a minute. So I do think that it's entirely possible that the Saints could shop one or both wide receivers as we get through preseason and towards the end of training camp, because everybody knows about the running back situation behind Alvin Kamara, and I'm sure we'll get into that. We just talked about the lack of depth at linebacker. You could move one of these 2 guys realistically for either a day 3 draft pick or even some depth at either one of those other positions.
You got anything, Brian?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think a few years ago, Mike Thomas won Offensive Player of the Year. Do you think he could have that type of season this year?
Yeah, absolutely do. I truly think that for my money, Michael Thomas is the best wide receiver in the NFL. And obviously I have black and gold colored sunglasses on, and I see laughing all across the panel. I think realistically, though, if Michael Thomas is healthy, I don't think anybody could argue that he is at least top 5 at that position. So, yeah, MVP, the MVP award always goes to a quarterback. Let's face reality. But offensive player of the year, like you said, Brian, he already won it in 2019. With the time off he's had with injury, if he has a huge year, I think he realistically is more in line for a comeback player of the year type of award. But I absolutely think he has the ability to put up the numbers worthy of being another offensive player of the year candidate.
Okay. All right, so I got to bring it back to the linebacker issue, and I forgot to ask you this in the opening, topics. But do you think they'll regret the loss of Quan Alexander? Or you're a Quan
I know
guy?
the fans do. I know the fans do. Quan was a great fit in this defense. There's no doubt about it. The chemistry that he had with Demario Davis was off the charts. But I think it was very clear that Dennis Allen and the coaching staff wanted to go more in the direction of Pete Werner. And we were actually hearing that they did offer Quan an opportunity and a contract to come back, but they wouldn't guarantee him starter snaps. And that's why Quan elected to sign with the New York Jets. And hey, I wish the guy all the luck in the world, but yeah, given the depth, and I like the signing of John Bostic, as I said before. I love the signing of Eric Wilson this offseason, but the fit that Quan had in this defense, I do think, especially depending on what happens with Pete Werner's injury, I do think it's entirely possible that they will quickly regret not being able to bring Quan back into this defense.
Man, that's I don't know, man. I hope the guys stay healthy, man. Pete Werner, after listen to a few analysis from other Saints writers, they kind of, explain the reason why they drafted Warner in the second round, and if you kept Warner and you kept Quan, it's kind of like, and you started Quan over Warner, it's kind of like you kind of admitting that you wasted a pick if you decided to do that. I could understand that, but the depth is kind of hurting right now, so we'll see how everything plays out. All right, so. The first preseason game against the Houston Texans, Andy Dalton, looked like Drew Brees out there when he went 5 for 5. Saints Twitter, Facebook groups just blow it up. And I've been, listening to a few, radio shows in the New Orleans area on iHeart, and it's just been kind of like hitting to Dalton possibly starting over Jameis, and it could be a QB controversy, and people believe that Dalton could lead this team if Jameis was not to play, for a few games. I just want to ask you, do you think there's a chance of a QB controversy happening between Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton?
No, absolutely not. And just judging by the tone of your voice, Derek, I don't think you believed it either. Dalton is undoubtedly heads and shoulders better than last year's backup Trevor Siemian. And even at 33, 34 years old, I think he is still the type of guy that you could have success with in this offense if you give him the right protection and if he has to step in for Jameis Winston. But Andy Dalton is nothing more than that. He is Jameis's backup. He's Winston's eyes and ears on the sideline, and he's a veteran ear to lean on. A lot of people forget, because it feels like Jameis Winston has been in the league forever, but he's still a young guy. He's only 28 years old. He has 4, 5, 6, 5 years of starting experience. Most of those with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You could throw that out the window a little bit. So I think that veteran experience on the sideline is going to be invaluable for Jameis. But there is absolutely no quarterback controversy in New Orleans, none whatsoever.
Yeah, man, they've been. If I tell you offline, if I mention the names, that you know what I'm talking about, what's bringing this stuff up. But I mean, it could happen, man, but I don't think I see it. So, Brian, you got anything to add?
No, I'll just will agree with this point about Andy Dalton's a much better backup than Trevor Siemian. So at least you have that going for you.
Barry, you got anything to add?
Outside of the guys that were drafted in the first round, and Penning and Olave, what draft pick do you think this year, from second round on, are the Saints expecting to have a big impact?
Of their draft choices this past year?
Besides Olave and besides the first rounders, who we know are going to probably step in and be starters or high contributors.
And I agree with you. I think the first rounders, especially Olave, they are expecting big things out of. But don't sleep on Alontae Taylor, their second round pick from Tennessee. That pick raised a lot of eyebrows, myself included. And I'm a draft guru. I mean, I study the heck out of these guys leading up to the draft. And I got to admit, I overlooked Alontae Taylor. And I was at a friend's wedding during the second round of the draft, and I got the update on my phone. And I was like, "Who?" And I scrolled through, and that night after the wedding, much to my wife's dismay, I actually started watching film on Alontae Taylor that night and into the next day. And I got to tell you, I'm really impressed by this kid. He fits the prototype for what Saints co-defensive coordinator Chris Richard likes in his defensive backs. He's a big, physical, athletic guy. A lot of people in the media and Saints media assumed they just drafted Alontae Taylor, who played cornerback at Tennessee. They're going to convert him to safety. And then Dennis Allen said in the press conference about him immediately afterward, he said, "No, we're looking at this guy as a corner." And the film that I saw on him, I can understand why. Again, he's a big, physical, athletic guy. He's not backing down from these Saints receivers in practice. And I realize they're very deep at the position. He's not going to challenge Paulson Adebo and certainly not Marshawn Lattimore for starter snaps. But the Saints play a lot of multiple defensive back sets, as we know, 5 and 6 defensive backs on the field at the same time. Alontae Taylor, I think, is going to be in that mix for nickel and dime packages immediately right off of the bat. And I think people are going to be really surprised and very encouraged at what this kid brings to this defense.
All right. So, CD Deuce, do you think that situation gets resolved leading up to the season, or do you think that's a guy that could possibly get pursue free agency once the season's up? Now that they have Alontae Taylor out there.
Listen, CD Deuce is a fan favorite. There's no doubt. He brings an edge to that defense. You can't help but love C.J. Gardner-Johnson if he's on your team. But I don't think this contract situation gets resolved before the start of the regular season. And we'll know in the next week or two. The Saints always seem to sign a pending free agent sometime during the preseason before that player goes into free agency. So maybe CD Deuce is one of those guys. Maybe Eric McCoy. Maybe Marcus Davenport. I tend to lean more towards they're going to wait to see how Gardner-Johnson plays during the season, knowing that they have the franchise tag in their back pocket to use rather if they want to avoid him hitting the free agent market. Because we saw the Chargers just re-signed Derwin James to a monstrous contract extension. We see safeties getting all this money now, and none of the safeties that are getting paid these big bucks have the versatility that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson had. He's just as good a cornerback as he is a safety. So that's why I want to see him re-sign. I understand why the fans love him. I want him to stay around because of what he brings on the football field. He's a defensive weapon anywhere you line him up. So I have a hard time believing that the Saints are going to let him get away completely, but I also can't see a contract extension coming before the start of the regular season.
Gotcha. All right, so another I would say a hot button issue within Saints training camp, Saints circles has been that running back 2 position, and now it has been reported that Alvin Kamara may not get suspended at all this season because of that incident at the Pro Bowl, and that kind of takes a weight off. But as we know with Alvin Kamara, even you kind of rely on him a little too much as the RB1, he can suffer injury and can miss time, and their offense suffers, like we saw last year when I think after like Thanksgiving or when Jameis went on and lost a lot of football games and Kamara was out. So we have Abram Smith, who they took out of Baylor, undrafted rookie, ran for over 1,600 yards. You got Tony Jones Jr., the back that we thought was going to be doing pretty good, but fell through. I saw a tweet online. Somebody said that I think it was Les E said that Tony Jones Jr. is the greatest preseason running back of all time.
Right.
It kind of makes sense. But who do you think wins that position? And if Smith doesn't make the team, do you think he's a practice squad player, or they let him go?
Boy, I tell you, Derek, I like Abram Smith a lot. I liked him coming out of. I love the fact that they signed him. I loved his tape at Baylor. He's a hard runner, a tough between the tackles guy, but he looks like he runs with great vision. I know he put the ball on the ground against Houston late in the game. He's obviously going to have to stop doing that. Other than that, he had a couple nice runs against the Texans. I have to believe right now that he's the favorite in that. He's the favorite in that race for the number 3 back behind Kamara and Mark Ingram. But yeah, that battle's still got to be played out the rest of the way. Tony Jones Jr. had a couple nice runs. Dwayne Washington, we know that the coaches love him because of what he brings on special teams. And don't rule out Divine Ozigbo either. We're not going to see much, if any, of Alvin Kamara in the preseason. They're going to go real light on Mark Ingram, too, because you know what Mark's going to bring to the table, and you want to save those veteran legs as much as you can. So that leaves all the reps against the Packers and against the Chargers coming to Abram Smith, Ozigbo, and Jones. One of those guys have to step up. Thus far, even though they've all had decent moments, nobody has at this point. I can see them liking Abram Smith enough to bring back on the practice squad if they cut him. But if he shows off too much in the preseason, remember, to be on the practice squad, you got to clear waivers through every NFL team first. So, if the Saints believe this guy, someone is going to sign this guy if we release him before we get him back to the practice squad, then you got to keep him on the active roster. So I think the reps against Green Bay and the following week against not San Diego, but LA is going to tell us a lot about how Dennis Allen feels about the pecking order of these running backs. If you start to see a guy like Abram Smith get less and less reps, or get a couple drives with the starting unit and then have a seat, that tells us, whether it's Abram or Washington, whoever it is, if they do that with a guy, that tells us that they're feeling pretty strong about him and they don't want to risk an injury. If we're seeing all of these guys play well into the late third, midway through the fourth quarter, that means that the competition is still going to be 100% up for grabs. So I think Friday's game against Green Bay is going to tell us a lot about this running back pecking order.
All right. Hey, Leo, got anything to add? Seabury?
Tight end position, Adam Trautman is he's listed as a starter. But the big adjustment is Taysom Hill. This is his first year playing tight end as a full time. So how is he doing in that aspect? And what contributions will he have this year? Are they going to be kind of similar to what he's done in the past, or is he just going to be fully just catching passes? That's what he's going to do.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head with your first comment. I think what we see out of Taysom Hill in 2022 is going to be a lot of what we've seen from him in the past. He's probably going to be running more pass routes. I have no doubt about that. But we're going to see Taysom Hill out of the backfield. We're going to see him running the ball. We're going to see him lined up at quarterback in those RPO and those wildcat snaps. He's going to have to work his way into a more traditional tight end role. When he's on the field, when he's on the field but not in the backfield, I expect them to move Taysom Hill around and to use an old term, an H-back role, or as a move tight end, move him around in motion, get him in the slot, get that athleticism in space. I know Taysom has put on weight. But I can't see him being a more traditional inline blocking tight end at this point in time, because you really look at it. If they use him that way, that takes away from what he does best. And what does he do best? He runs the football and he uses that athleticism in space. So I think Taysom is going to be a work in progress as he learns the position, and he's a little bit behind in that development because he was dealing with a rib injury that caused him to miss almost a full week of practice. So that's all the more reason for me to believe that that Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael are going to use Taysom Hill much the way we saw Sean Payton use Taysom Hill the first 2 or 3 years he had him.
Brian, got anything?
This is actually just a different question, just overall. The Saints. How do you think their season goes? I don't know if you've thought of that yet, or how do you think their season goes?
And again, I'm going to sound like I'm wearing black and gold-colored glasses. I think that this is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I really do. I know people are down on the NFC South. They just want to hand the division over to Tampa Bay, no questions asked. But listen, we know that even last year with all those offensive struggles, the Saints. I'm not going to say that they own Tampa Bay, but to be polite, they give Tom Brady and the Buccaneers all that they can handle. I see no reason for that part to change. You look at the talent that this team has on paper on both sides of the football, the depth that they have at a lot of those positions. Even if, and the key is Jameis Winston, obviously, and how Dennis Allen performs in his first year as a coach with the Saints. If those two guys even perform adequately, this is a team that's over 500, 9-10 wins, and probably a wild card team. If Jameis is as good as I think Jameis can be, and Dennis Allen has learned from his mistakes with the Raiders a decade or so ago, then that's where I think that this team can be a Super Bowl contender. I'll put talent-wise, I'll put them right up at the top with anybody. So if I had to make my prediction right now, I'd call them a 12-win team. And if they don't win the NFC South, they're right there, and taking home one of the top wild card spots. And once you get into the playoffs, it's anybody's game.
Gotcha. I feel that. All right, so in 90 though, Ian Book, where do you think he stands after going forward? Practice squad or going?
Ian Book's not going to make this team, fellas. And I'm not just saying that because he played poorly against the Texans. I thought coming into training camp that he had an uphill climb. I thought at best he would have to ball out in the preseason, and he still has time to do that. But I thought he would have to ball out in the preseason to force the coaches to keep him on the roster. I think they're still eyeing Ian Book up to bring back as a practice squad guy that they can continue to hopefully develop as a serviceable backup. But if he plays poorly, he'd probably clear waivers for them to do just that. Ian Book has 2 more preseason games to show that he can be competitive against NFL caliber defenses. If he can, that'll force Dennis Allen to keep him on the roster rather than subject him to waivers. But right now, I think they feel very confident with Jameis Winston. Again, assuming Jameis is healthy, they feel confident in Andy Dalton as the backup. And you have that guy, Taysom Hill, as an emergency quarterback if all else fails. So I think they're eyeing up keeping an extra player at one of these other positions and maybe bringing Ian Book back as a practice squad guy that they could hopefully continue to develop. It's on Ian Book to play extremely well, much, much better than he already has, to force those coaches to change his mind. That's kind of where I see Ian Book at this point. And we're going to see him get the bulk of the snaps against Green Bay on Friday for sure.
Seabury, got anything? Got anything?
Well, can I get?
Yeah. Go ahead. He got it. He's ready.
Oh, okay. Well, Tyrann Mathieu has made his homecoming back to the New Orleans area, and I know he's been pumped in terms of like coming back. Where would you rank this Saints secondary in terms of their like? I know DB thinks that he thinks highly of them, and so what do you think of them? That Saints secondary.
Yeah, and he does think highly of himself, and that's good. I love the confidence. On paper, I think that this has the potential to be the best secondary that the Saints have ever had. And I know that's one heck of a statement because that unit played extremely good football last year. But on paper, the additions of Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu are athletic upgrades over Marcus Williams and Malcolm Jenkins. You can do more with Marcus May. You can do a lot more with Tyrann Mathieu. We saw Malcolm Jenkins, and I love Malcolm Jenkins, but he was a liability in coverage, especially man-to-man. You could not move Marcus Williams up into the slot to take on a tight end or a receiver in man-to-man coverage. He was a prototypical free safety with excellent range and ball skills, but you don't want him in man-to-man coverage. Marcus May, Tyrann Mathieu, you can do all those things with. You can move them up in the box. You can move them into slot coverage. Either can play a single high safety. They have the speed and range to do that. And they have the football intelligence to play a double safety or a 2 high safety formation. Having said that, I would not be surprised if there were some coverage breakdowns early in the season. When you change both starting safeties, there are bound to be some communication breakdowns. And what people don't realize, one of the things that make Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo and C.J. Gardner-Johnson so good at man coverage last year is they had the utmost confidence in their safety help behind them. They knew that they had no worries about getting beat deep over the top because they had that deep safety coverage. So they could be a lot more aggressive in that coverage underneath. So that's where I'm a little bit concerned early in the season, especially when they're going up against Tom Brady, and then they have Kirk Cousins and those Vikings receivers in Week 4. It would not surprise me if there were some coverage breakdowns due to a breakdown in communication early in the season. But I think if these guys stay healthy, ultimately they're going to be the best secondary in the NFL, and quite probably the best that the Saints have ever had. You certainly have to love what they have on paper.
All right, Brian, got anything?
Yeah, it's a question about Marcus Davenport. I remember when the traded up for him a few years ago. At first, I thought they were drafting the quarterback. Then they shocked me and maybe a lot of people when they selected Marcus Davenport. What are your thoughts on him, and do you think he can maybe live up to them for them trading up for him?
Brian, I think he can live up, to those lofty expectations, and we've seen glimpses of that throughout Davenport's career. And he's coming off of his best season productivity wise. When he's on the field and he's healthy, that man cannot be blocked one-on-one. It takes a double team to even contain him, and he has both the strength and athletic burst to beat double teams. If you have to double team Marcus Davenport, that means you're probably leaving a guy like Cam Jordan on the other side in single coverage. So it's a catch-22 for offensive coaches and offensive lines. Having said that, the biggest criticism about Marcus Davenport has always been his availability. He has missed a boatload of games throughout his career, including 6 or 7 contests last year. That continues to be the biggest criticism of Marcus Davenport until he proves them wrong. And he started out this camp on the physically unable to perform list too. Now he was dealing with, I think it was a shoulder injury and rehabbing a partial amputation of a pinky finger. But once the games start for real, Marcus Davenport has to stay on the field. If he stays on the field for even 14, 15 games, I think he's an all-pro. If he doesn't, then that starts to test the depth of a very good Saints defensive line who has very good players on it, but nobody to the caliber of what they would have at their starting unit if Marcus Davenport is in that lineup. So, and coming into a contract here, he's looking at some potential big dollars too. So that's extra motivation for him to stay on the field. Saints coaches, Saints fans are certainly hoping and keeping our fingers crossed that he does, because when he is in the lineup, he takes this defense and that front seven to an entirely new level.
Gotcha. Yeah, hopefully he plays pretty well this year. Big contract year going forward. If he does, though, Saints probably going to keep him. Mm-hmm. All right, man. Last topic. Tomorrow we play the Green Bay Packers. Far better competition compared to last week against the Houston Texans. They're going to be playing against a really good defense. The defense, from what I'm hearing, is going to be pretty good in Green Bay. So I want to ask you, at the end of the game between the Saints and the Packers, what are we going to find out about the Saints as the season kicks off, about the team?
And like you said, Derek, this is a great test for the Saints, depth-wise. Green Bay has one of the better defenses in the entire NFL, and extremely deep secondary, which excites me, because we just got done talking a few minutes ago about the wide receiver competition. Which one of the backup wide receivers for the Saints are going to step up? Well, they'll be tested against the Green Bay Packers secondary, so I'm looking forward to that challenge. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a real a real indicator to how deep this Saints team really is, because we're not going to see much of the starters, if any. We already know Jameis Winston's not going to play. Trevor Penning may not play. Ryan Ramchek's probably not going to play. I'd be shocked if Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, if those guys got any more than a couple of snaps. So again, it's going to be Andy Dalton, leading the shambles of a first-team offense. We've already seen indicators how deep and talented the Saints defense is. We're all going to be looking forward to the offense. Which one of the running backs step up? How deep is this receiving core really? And can the second string offensive line actually open up holes and protect the quarterback? Against the Green Bay defense, it's of top tier caliber. That's going to be a great indicator. And Green Bay's offense too. Aaron Rodgers, I'd be shocked if Aaron plays. But the Packers have some receivers that are out to prove themselves also. To shut up their quarterback and stop that criticism. We already know that Green Bay has an extremely talented offensive line and a deep core of running backs. So they're going to pound the rock at that New Orleans defense. Can the Saints linebackers step up? Demario Davis probably not going to play. Pete Werner, we know, is not going to play. So it's going to be a test for those backup linebackers as well. I just think all across the board at the end of the day, and again, I'm going to ignore the final score. Preseason final scores do not matter, Saints fans. They don't matter. You pay attention to the other stuff. You root for health, and you look for the development of rookies and how deep your football team is. Seabury, you pointed it out before. We don't think we'll see much out of Penning and Olave this game. But again, how deep are the Saints? We think they're pretty deep defensively, but we're going to find out after this game.
All right, man. We're gonna close it out on that note. Let the folks know where they can find you at on Twitter, social media.
Derek, Brian, Seabury, I appreciate you having me on. It's been a pleasure. Would love to do this again sometime. Folks, you can follow me. I am on Facebook, Bob Rose. I'm over on Twitter at BobbyR2613. I do have my own podcast. Brendan Boylan and I run a podcast called the Bayou Blitz that could be found live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And all of my articles are through the Saints News Network, which could be found on Facebook, Saints News Network, or over on Twitter at Saints News. I post all of my articles and my shows on my personal pages as well as the Saints News Network page, and we do live broadcasts. And if you go on YouTube and look for Saints News Network and you hit that subscribe and follow button, you'll get live notifications of any time we do a live broadcast.
All right, that's all we have for y'all for right now. Give us a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Listen to this through Apple, Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating, leave your reviews, leave your comments, concerns, anything you might have about the Saints. Have a best night. Peace. We out. Who that?
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.